Hello, welcome back to Asian Cinema Season 2. In this video I'm going to be reviewing the 2018 film released on Netflix in the majority of the world in 2018, Us and Them, directed by Taiwanese singer-songwriter and actress Renee Liu, which I believe is a stage name, and she certainly seems to be more noted as a singer throughout the 90s, releasing many albums and acting in a lot of films. This is I believe, her feature film directorial debut, although don't quote me on that. And this is a romance story, a drama about these two characters who meet on New Year's Eve on a train and become friends, become fast friends. They're both from the same rural kind of hometown, and they both end up moving to Beijing. And we follow them throughout their kind of young life together as friends, and notably on kind of New Year's Eve every year, something happens that is kind of very pivotal to their kind of relationship together. And I'm not going to attempt to pronounce their names, because if I was to try and get it wrong, it would really bug me if I continually got their names wrong for like this entire video. So forgive me for not even trying on that one. But I think that the two actors who played the guy and the girl were wonderful, like just fantastic, and really their chemistry and relationship is what really makes the movie. And we have this story presented in a split timeline, where the beginning we see them, I believe it's like 2003, early 2000s, they meet on a train on New Year's Eve, and then we cut to present day. I think it's 2017 or even maybe 2018 on New Year's Eve, and we see the characters meeting each other again on a plane, which gets grounded and isn't able to take off. And it seems like they haven't seen each other for a very long time. And this timeline is presented in black and white. The past timeline is presented in color, which is not what you would expect from the way films are usually done, when black and white, in some cases, kind of denotes that, you know, this is going to be a past timeline. You know, black and white often is seen as something in a film that is used for a flashback. If we're doing a color movie, the black and white represents the past and so on. In this case, it's the opposite. And it's a very smart device that we learn to understand why it's presented in that way. Because at first, to me, it did feel like it was just trying to be a bit artsy. Like, ooh, two timelines, black and white and color. But it really made sense. And maybe it was a bit on the nose for some people, but I really enjoyed the reveal of why it's in black and white and why the other part is in color. And we follow them as young kind of adults, kind of, you know, trying to make their dreams come true in Beijing. The woman is very much all about finding a husband and finding a kind of a comfortable life for herself. And she kind of darts about between many different jobs. And the guy is a games programmer. His dream is to make games and to, you know, be successful with that. And he ends up working in jobs he doesn't like. He works at a call center that he hates. And you follow just the life of, you know, a young 20-something, group of friends. There are other characters in the periphery as well who are kind of linked to those two, who often become more successful than their two friends. And so we see him struggle with the fact that his friends are passing him by and getting kind of, you know, office jobs and kind of becoming managers and things like that. And, you know, I'm not being entirely specific, but, you know, that kind of a thing where people have gone on and had careers, and he's still in this small kind of dingy flat. You're surrounded by so many other people that, you know, the walls are paper thin, and he's just working away at his game and doesn't really know where he's going with his life. And she's much the same. And they're very good friends, and it develops into a romance. And the way it's done is so beautiful. You know, it isn't the typical kind of, hey, I actually like you, you know, and then they start getting it on. Like, it's really playfully and believably and honestly done, the way that they transition from friends to lovers. And I fell in love with them. I really did fall in love with their romance together. And there's an incredible scene when the camera kind of comes up from them on the bed and shows you all the other flats around it. Like, you see the whole set, basically. Not that it comes across as like you're seeing behind the scenes, but it's more like a, you know, just like a top-down view, like a cutaway, almost like a, you know, Wes Anderson film, like in The Life Aquatic, when you see the kind of like a slice through the side of the ship, and you see everyone in all the rooms. It's like that, but from above. And it's a great shot that kind of, again, shows you all the other life that's going on around them, and what it's like living in that kind of condition where There are so many people living around you, living their own lives in very small rooms, and what it's like to live in very cramped living quarters and so on. But regardless, I thought that was a really cool moment in the film, and some of the cinematography is fantastic in that regard. But you know, I always say I like it when a film has really nice cinematography in certain moments, and the rest it kind of just lets the story play out and very nicely frames everything, composes it, and captures what's going on. But you know, every now and again there'll be a nice little use of a flare in the way the film is shot that kind of makes it a bit more interesting, and it doesn't feel like it's showing off too much, like it's trying to make every shot look amazing, and I like that. And I feel like that's a very, very bland and uninteresting thing to say about a film, but I did feel that way about this, where every now and again you'd get a shot like the top-down view, which is like, whoa, that's really cool, and then we just get on with the film and we don't have to kind of dwell on it too much. And one of my favorite moments of the entire film is when he comes outside and she's sat on this old armchair that's been left out on the street, and she's like, can we take it back home? And he's like, no, of course not. You know, like, I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, no, this dirty old thing. And she's like, oh, I really want to have an armchair in the place. So they drag it up there, and it becomes kind of this kind of you know, this thing they look on with great affection, and it becomes kind of a warm part of their home together, which is a very small home for even one person, and they're both very cramped in that space. And towards the end of them living in that place, and they eventually have to move. They have to leave the armchair behind, and they're sat on the back of this very small truck that's carrying all their possessions, and it's driving away, and we see their view of the armchair just slowly growing smaller in the distance. And it, to me, oh my god, it hit me so hard in the sense of just that feeling you get when you leave a place that has so many memories, and that armchair was emblematic of their time together in that place, and you literally see it being taken away from you. And you know, there are memories in any place that you live, good or bad. In this case, it was good for them. You know, they had bad times there, but they had a lot of good times there, and it was really where that small place was where they became who they became as a couple. And so that chair, you know, and I just love the focusing of that. It was really well done, and it really summed up everything that they were probably feeling at that time by simply filming an armchair. I thought it was a really nice way to do it, and perhaps a little bit simple and obvious, but I think it really worked. Now, the present timeline in black and white, we follow them getting a hotel room together. You know, there's a very palpable sense of tension between the two as they see each other after many years, and at this point we don't know what happened between them. We don't know why they split up, and we see that in the, you know, the color sequences as both of those things kind of slowly match up to each other to the point where I think it was really well done. And you can really take a gimmick like that and overdo it, or you know, get too clever with it, you know. And I feel like that Leo never makes the gimmick gimmicky. You know, at no point was I watching it thinking, oh yeah, back and forth. You know, I was always like, oh, more of the you know, the color stuff, like what happened with them, why did they split up? Ooh, more of the black and white stuff, what's going to happen between them now? So like the two things work hand in hand, where I'm intrigued in both storylines, both, you know, the timelines of these two characters, why they ended up splitting apart, what's going to happen with them now that they've reunited. And just every element keeps kind of getting revealed to you in ways where it's like, oh, you know, just I love the way this thing unfolded. There's also kind of a second part of the film in which we focus on the main character, his father, who becomes very fond of the girl and sees her almost as a daughter figure. And then when they do split up, you know, she remains a part of his life in a way that she goes to see him, and every New Year's Eve, you know, his father will have a dinner, you know, and all the family gets together. And as the years go by, that dinner party gets smaller and smaller, and it's just absolutely heartbreaking to see this old man who just, you know, he's losing everything around him, and he keeps moving forward, keeps putting one leg in front of the other. But you know, his son is gone, and you know, is off in Beijing and hardly ever visits, and he has his, you know, kind of almost his daughter-in-law, who at this point isn't even together with his son, and she comes to visit him anyway, and kind of, you know, in a sense lies to him by, you know, not revealing that they've split up. And I mean, that part of the father was really heartbreaking, and you know, it felt to me a bit like Tokyo Story in the way that I came away from that film wanting to kind of speak to my family and tell them how much I love them. And I think this film does that too, and in almost more of a heartbreaking way than Tokyo Story. Not quite, but it really affected me, that whole thread with the father, and him being on his own as well. I mean, it was just, oh man. But once we learn more, it gets even more heartbreaking, and this may be a spoiling thing. So if you feel like you want to watch this film, I would highly recommend it, so go check it out and maybe come back to this video. So now from this point on, we'll talk about the spoilers. So, as it turns out, they split up because he withdrew into himself and was so disappointed in himself and not having a career, not having any prospects. And at one point she says, "I'm leaving." And he doesn't even reply to her. He's just sat there playing his video games with his headphones on. And he doesn't say anything, so she leaves. And then you realize he did hear her, and suddenly he realizes the error of his mistake, and he runs out, he goes chasing after her, he finds her at the train station, she's there on the train is stopped, and he stands there and looks at her. The door is open, and she looks at him, and he doesn't do anything. And the train door shuts, and she goes, and he watches her leave, and that's it. And then we go to the black and white timeline, and at this point they've kind of got the hotel room where they were kind of forced to, I think, because there wasn't enough room, and so they kind of, they're catching up, they're trying to kind of, reintroduce themselves to each other. They're learning things about each other that, has happened to them in the many years since they've last seen each other. And they go for a walk outside, and she says to him, "If you'd got on that train with me, I would have never left you." Oh, right through the heart. I mean, holy shit. She said, "If you just had the courage to step onto that train that day, I would have never left you." Like, when you're so invested in a relationship, that just hits you like a brick. It really does. And, they talk in that kind of black and white timeline about how, things went wrong, and they wish that they'd been better. And for him, all the color left his life when she left. And that's why we're now in a world of black and white. And he has a wife and a child. And it's very awkward in that sense. And there's a funny scene, actually, where he's in the hotel room, and his child FaceTimes him and says, "Let me see the hotel room." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, sure." And he's like turning the phone, and she's like hiding under the bed and stuff. And the kid's like, "Show me everything." And it would be so shady if he, if his kid was to see that he was with another woman in a hotel room, even though nothing was happening, and they were just talking and trying to kind of, again, get used to being in each other's presence again, and feeling out how they were with each other after all that time. But it feels like they're thrown together. The plane they both happen to be on after all those years is grounded. They go to the hotel, they have to share the same room. It almost felt a bit planes, trains, and automobiles to me. And then they decide to take a rental car and drive back to where they're both going. And then the car breaks down, and so they're really forced to get everything out. And it's a hugely emotional moment and release when they finally kind of talk about how they feel about each other, and how they both kind of know that it can't really work out the way that it should. And it's very, very sad. And even more sad when we think about the father is when we go back to the color timeline and we see the son arrive back home to meet his father, who at this point is going kind of, a little bit blind, and he's getting older, and he sees his son's wife, who isn't our main character, isn't the girl. And he looks at her and he goes, "Oh, it's you," thinking it's the same girl from before. And it's, oh my god. But later on we find out that he knew that it wasn't her, which is an intriguing part of the story that almost makes me feel like he was being very unkind in doing that to his son, and trying to make it out like he thought it was his ex-girlfriend. But there is a moment at the very end where the son goes home and finds a letter from his father, which is very emotional. In fact, the end credits of the film play out with real people who've been given airtime, basically, in this movie, the credits, to hold up a sign to tell the person who they really want to tell something what they want to tell. And it's very lots of different messages, whether it's like, hey, so and so, I miss you. Hey, so and so, do you remember me? Hey, so and so, like, you know, you were the worst thing that ever, you know, like, there's all sorts of different colors and shades of messages that are presented in the end. And I guess the message is from this film is to tell the people who you care about what you think of them, how you feel about them, I should say. What you think of them almost seems to, you know, carry along a negative connotation, but to tell the people tell the people who you care about what you feel about them, basically, which is something I strongly believe in. I think that we as people, for the most part, have so many people in our lives that we think a lot of and never tell them that. Particularly people who aren't really like a close part of our lives, just people who we really like. And when we see them, it lights up our day. And we never tell them that because it would be too weird, it would be too emotional, or not emotional, but too like, you know, too much information, you know. But it's not something that you want to say to other people. And that film captures that, but it also mainly captures the kind of the raw, passionate love you can feel for someone when you're younger, I think, and how heartbreaking it can be when you realize that that isn't going to carry on for the rest of our lives. It isn't going to work. And whether there are mistakes that are made along the way by both people or not, we get to a point where it just feels like it's not meant to be. And he ends up making his game, and it's very popular and successful. And it's about sending letters to people and expressing things that you wish that you could have always expressed to them. And I think that was a really nice way to tie into the ending of the film, where they very emotionally and tearfully kind of, you know, separate and go their separate ways. But to me personally, my own headcanon is that they do end up getting together again, because the way that they are in that car together, when they really get emotional in the present timeline, and they're like talking about how much they loved each other, and they're so emotional, to me, that love is still there. Like, if I was to meet up with my ex-girlfriend, you know, who I was in love with when I was like 18, 19, you know, to me there wouldn't be that much feeling there, because, you know, I'm with someone who, you know, is who I'm with for the rest of my life, and that assuming that he has a love for his wife and his child, you know, he would be the same and wouldn't be that emotionally moved by it. He'd be like, oh man, that was a lot of, we went through a lot together, you know, and that was that, and that was then. But no, he is, in that moment, so kind of emotional. So to me, that means that that's his true love. They belong together. And so for me, in my own headcanon, eventually that would get worked out. He would leave his wife, unfortunately, and hopefully make that work, and that they would eventually get back together again. Because to me, personally, that level of emotion they had in that car together means that there's still something there that is just, you can't let go of. And that might be the completely wrong way to read the movie, but that's the way I read it and how I imagine it would continue beyond the frame of the actual film itself. But I thought it was a fantastic drama. It was really emotional, really funny. There's some really funny moments in the film. Like at one point, the neighbors in the really small flat from the beginning are kind of having sex, and so she gets up on the bed and starts, I think, banging the wall and like moaning and stuff, and she kind of encourages him to start moaning as well. Really funny scene. And so it has a lot of heart to it in many ways, and you know, characters make wrong decisions and do wrong things, but you still, I think the mark of a great film is when you have characters who are flawed, who make wrong choices, bad choices, but you still root for them and you still believe in them as people, and you're so invested in these two characters, and I was completely throughout the duration of the film. And it's one I'd go back to, but I'd have to prepare myself emotionally for it because it is really sad. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Us and Them. Thank you for watching. Please go check it out if you haven't. I'm assuming you have if you've watched this far, but regardless, I'd love to hear thoughts on it if you have or haven't seen it. And it's on Netflix, so there's no excuse. You can go check it out right now. I believe it's actually the first Chinese language Netflix original, as they call them, when they acquire a film and release it on Netflix, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, I would love to see more from Renee Liu if she continues to make films, because I think she made a corker of a movie here. It's a great film, and actually made my top 20 as of this recording films of 2018. So that's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you.